are you? Nice to see you. How's everyone doing? Welcome, welcome. I thought I'd hang out with you for a bit and answer some questions. Sounds kind of fun. Why is the music bending? Do you hear that? You know what's strange? Is that my music bends, but not my voice. How you doing? Hi, TikTok. Hi. Hi, Instagram. Let's make sure Instagram's up and running. I don't know if it is. It's strange. How are you? Happy to be with you. All right. Let's get this thing started. Let's have some fun. I'm going to start with some questions for today. We're going to start the first question here in just a second. How you doing? Hi, Instagram. Hi, TikTok. Hi. Hi, Chris Baldwin. Happy you're here. Hi, Wreck-It Felix. How you doing? Nice to see you all. Happy to be with you. Hi, YouTube. All right. First question. We got calling questions on SpeakPipe. You can see it in the description if you want to leave a question yourself. Let's dive into the first one.
How do we forgive ourselves for the things that we did when we were very unhealed or before we started therapy? I have apologized to people. I have made amends with people. I have a good relationship with these people now. They've graciously forgiven me. But I have a hard time forgiving myself for some of the things I've done and said.
Who here has that tension also? Things that you've done in the past that feel heavy for you, that are like, I know that we've repaired, I know that we've moved on. But to be honest, every time I think about it, it just kind of makes me cringe. Anyone feel that way? Yeah, Alex. Sunflower, 1996. Yep, I see it. Yeah. Yeah, you do. Radman, Reed. Yeah, Susie. Yeah. I think that usually the breakdown in the self-forgiveness thing, so that feeling of cringe, that feeling of like when I remember that thing that I did, that thing that I was a part of, how I responded, and then it like, you just get that overwhelming bit of like, I hate it, and I try not to think about it, try not to go into that, because I just have such a hard time forgiving myself. There's usually a breakdown in one of two things. The first one is there's a breakdown in grieving what happened for the other person, or there's a breakdown in offering yourself the gift, G-I-F-T, gift of self-forgiveness. And really, I think that the self-forgiveness won't take, in your own heart and mind until you've done the first step. So let me just kind of walk you through this for a second. I think that guilt is an interesting thing. Guilt is pretty self-focused when you think about it. Guilt is very much concerned with how I feel, how I'm reacting, my state. It's not focused on the impact that your actions may or may not have had on the other person, right? And so the locus of focus needs to shift from how bad I feel into what it was like for the other person. The more that you focus on how terrible I am and how I wish I did differently and how could I be such an idiot or how could I not have da-da-da-da-da, like what does that mean about me as a mother? What does that mean about me as a boyfriend or girlfriend? This just means that I'm an idiot. Like, if you kind of continue down this self-critical, self-evaluative even path, you will get stuck because that's actually not the path to freedom. If you go down that cavern, you're just going to hit more and more dark caverns. But if you can go into what was it like for them when I said that, when I hurt the other person, when I was thoughtless, even when I didn't mean to, the fact that it had that kind of impact on them. What was that like? So then what you do is you sit with that and you grieve it. That's the first step. Grief is responding authentically to reality. That's my definition of grief. It might make you angry. It might make you sad. It might make you want to cry. It might make you walled off and dissociated and numb. It might make you feel a bit hopeless. It might make you feel stuck. Sit with it. Instead of pushing it off, instead of fixing it, instead of trying to understand it even, be with it. The next step is to really think about what amends remains left for me to take on, if any. Is there an apology I need to offer? Maybe I've already apologized. That's fine. You don't need to keep repeating it and repeating it until you feel differently. Again, that's a very self-focused way of thinking about it. That's like saying sorry to you so that I feel better is still a self-focused repair. What's the repair the other person needs from you? That's the question. Yeah, I mean, and I see that sunflower, like Nicole, it's like, it makes me not like myself. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that like, that's still a self-focused thing. You know, the central piece of the focus there is how much I don't like myself. That guilt is still an inward experience that isn't motivated by love for the other person. The thing that will heal you as much as them is your love for them. Not your hatred of you. Not your frustration with you. The thing that heals is leaning into the love you have for them. What remains to be done to make it right? Now, not all of us have access, to be able to make it right. Maybe they won't talk to me. Maybe it's just in the past and there's no redoing it. Like I can't redo my kid's childhood. I can't. We broke up, so it's not like I can go back to my ex and say all these things. So then the next step after that is like, all right, once I've made the reasonable amends, then what I have to do is offer myself the gift of self-forgiveness. And it's a gift. There's an understanding of I don't deserve it. And here's the kicker. There's lots of people in your life that you might need to forgive that also don't deserve it. That's the nature of forgiveness, is that it's undeserved. So if you're waiting for a point when you feel like you deserve it to let yourself off the hook, it's not coming. So the most that you can do is grieve and then change your behavior for the future and then let the guilt go, because the guilt is just another form of selfishness. That's hard. That's a hard pill to take in. I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. Like it's like, stop feeling so guilty. Like I'm feeling guilty for feeling guilty. All right, now we're caught in a loop. But it's the question, sunflower, how do I let the guilt go? It's something that you're holding on to. So it's actually something you stop doing. It's not something you start doing. It's relaxing it. It's like when I feel the guilt settle in, I don't indulge it and pick up the phone. So you could think like, let's say that, remember anyone who remembers like landline phones plugged into your house, you could have like, a phone picked up off, and set on the side, and you can almost hear the conversation coming from the phone that's just kind of sitting there. I guess that I don't have to use landline phones for that analogy. We could do cell phones. We could do, all right, so your phone's on speaker and there's like a conversation happening on the other line. You don't have a choice per se on if you can hear it, right? Like let's say it's in the room with you. I got my phone. There's someone talking. Okay, I said it right there. It's like I can hear it, but I can choose whether to enter conversation with it or not. That's my choice. The choice you have is not what you feel. The choice is where you place your attention and your energy. So when I say let go, I'm not saying turn off the call. You might not have that power. The guilt keeps speaking in my ear, won't let me go. Fair enough. You don't have to enter conversation with it and let it absorb your attention. That's a choice. Which means you should probably put your attention somewhere else, because if I'm just sitting here trying not to listen to something, like something's playing and I'm just like, don't listen. Don't listen. I have to like do something else. I have to draw my attention onto something else. Does that make sense? This conversation with the guilt is all about you. It's about how terrible you are, how bad you feel about yourself, how you fell beneath your standards. The regret is a self-focused conversation. That's not going to help you or them. It's not going to help you move towards your values and making better choices. It's not going to help them feel better about. It's like this doesn't have value unless you reorient your attention towards love. This can be a wake-up call. Like if you're in denial that you've done anything wrong, if you're in some form of like posture of well, I didn't do anything wrong. They deserved it. Like I was fine. You might need to hold this up to your ear and be like, hey, get to reality. But then what you do with the reality is you focus on love, which is what does the other person need from me? Let me feel grief, not guilt, grief over what happened to them. And then I need to offer myself the gift of self-forgiveness, because if we're being honest, forgiveness is always a gift, and we offer that gift to other people. The people who have hurt us can't pay us back. So we need to forgive them. And then likewise with ourselves, we can't pay other people back. And so we need to forgive ourselves. It's like this, it's just like part of the nature of reality and relationship and humanity is like, not everything can be settled perfectly equal and paid back perfectly. You can't pay back an emotional wound. Because the emotional damage is not something you have access to go reinforce. It's not like if you blew $100, you can just give, I can just give you $100, or, it's not like there's not an equal transaction fee that I can just settle the accounts when it comes to emotion. Because we're finite creatures in time. So, does that help? Yeah. Yeah, so Amber Susie on Instagram says, the other person is not receiving the apology and not forgiving. What do I do? You essentially, you really think like, okay, I am available for the repair when they're ready. They might not be ready right now. That's fine. We don't know. Maybe down the road, it's different. It's like, as much as it depends on me, I am open for the reasonable steps of amends and repair. And then in the meantime, I'm going to let go of the guilt. I'm going to forgive the guilt. Because the guilt just keeps me focused on how much I don't like me, which is not what she needs or he needs, and not what I need. I'm reorienting my attention towards love. What kind of nurturance and care and change do I need in my life to step further into the values that I have, into the changes and behaviors that are going to be best for me and other people? That's where your attention should go. And then the attention is also shifted to what do they need to feel better? If I'm just focused on me, how much I don't like me and how sad I feel about me, that's only going to interrupt and slow down the whole process. So in the process of, okay, they're not forgiving me, they haven't accepted my apology, what do I do? You're patient. And you focus on aligning your actions with your values in the meantime, the self-work, right? Yeah. Yeah, lots of people thinking about it in the chat. Let's move on to a new topic. Let's dive into a new question.
Hey, Matthias.
Hey, hold on one sec, sorry. I pressed play on the wrong one. That one.
How do I move on from abandonment issues? So after learning and having people in my life currently that choose to stay, how do I learn and trust myself that what they say is true after they continuously have proven that it is true, that they have stayed? I'm having a hard time not instinctually falling back to automatically needing consistent reassurance. Thanks.
You know what I think? Sometimes you're reading a book and then you start thinking about all the the questions people ask you through the lens of the latest book that you're reading. It's like you kind of have a way that you've always typically answered this question, and then you have kind of like a new idea that's popped into your brain about like, oh, I wonder if this could work too. So like traditionally, the way I would have answered this, is through the lens of attachment and through the lens of essentially like kind of almost like healing the inner wounding, healing the wounds and the trauma and the events that have been in the past. I mean, because that you could think like there's these young parts of you that have been so hurt by the abandonment of the past. They're so nervous about getting hurt again. So one answer to this question could be something like, turn your attention towards those inner parts and then see what they need to feel safe and to connect to the people in your life. Because on one level, I think often like these parts aren't in contact with these new relationships. It's almost kind of like when you're scanning for danger, you don't see all the other good things that are going on. All you see are when things go bad, and you don't see when things go good. So for example, like here, I could give you like an analogy. Let's do this. In the chat, what color do you see? What's the first color that comes to your mind when you see this? Green. Nice. Green. Wow, a lot of green. Grebe, Blondie says. Grebe. Okay, what else? Instagram? Any color that comes to your mind immediately? Why green? You know what's weird? 95% of this is white. This card is white. Why'd you say green? Green is only 5%, maybe not, maybe even 3% of this card is green. 98% is white. Why'd you say green? Because it stands out. It's contrast. That's why. Even if the whole card is white, the first thing that pops in our mind is green because it stands out. That's right. Yep, you're right, Jenny, in TikTok. It stands out. And so I think that what we do in relationship is like 95% of this relationship is great, and they're reciprocal, and they're kind, and they're generous and thoughtful, and they like being around you, and they've said as much. And then there's one thing that stands out, and that's all we can see is green. It's like, I don't know, they're a little bit irked that we were late. And then we're like, they hate me. It's like, and they're like, what do you mean they hate you? It's like, green, and it's like, hold on, this whole thing is white. It's not green. It's like, but this thing, it could take over and then the whole relationship. It's like, the whole relationship is not. It's not green. It's white. Even when it spreads out, still the majority of this is white. Poor souls. I'm saying this to myself as much as anyone. I leap into this. We get it. I mean, in CBT world, they call this all or nothing thinking. It's like everything's all bad or all good. And the abandonment fire alarm in our brain, it tries to make sure that we don't get abandoned. And so if it sniffs even a little bit of smoke, the fire alarm goes off. If there's even a little bit of green, we're like, we freak out. That makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, even like on a survival level, like let's just take another look. Like imagine you're a villager and you come across a snake. Are you going to like lean in and see what kind of snake it is? Or are you just going to run away? You're just going to run away from the snake. It could have been a harmless snake. But better to run away because, you could think all your ancestors that like leaned in to see what kind of snake it was, they eventually died off. So the ancestors that survived were the ones that just, as a general rule, ran away from snakes. So there's mushrooms. Like if you're unfamiliar with what kind of mushroom is growing up out of the ground, you should just avoid it. Are some of them fine to eat? Probably. But the ones who experimented died off. The ancestors that generally were just like, you know what? Let's just stay away from the mushrooms we don't understand very well. I mean, better. Okay. You get the point. So our brains are kind of like designed to do that. That when we see green, we run. When we see green, we take action. When we see green, we freak out. The problem is it's like when the situation is more complex, especially social situations. When social situations are complex, our brain wants to take over and take drastic measures, and we need to regulate those responses and think objectively. We need to think like, all right, let's deal with the green that's there and not characterize the entire card by the green. Does that make sense? It has a lot to do with where you put your attention. Am I going to keep focusing on the green, or I should probably, and this is what gratitude practice does, by the way. This is why gratitude has all of this science behind it. It's like turn your attention to the white, the white, the white, the white. And then when you can contextualize it, then, this is actually very small. A question I like to ask, folks who are just like, what if they hate me? And I'm like, all right, what's the percentage chance that they hate you? 50%. And I'm like, well, hold on. Okay, they made one remark about how you didn't return their sweater after you said you'd return it, and they were a little irked by that. Okay, you think there's a 50-50 chance the relationship's toast? When's the last time you cut off a relationship over a late sweater? I haven't. Okay, all right. Is this an irrational person, your friend? No. Okay. Fair. All right, what's the real likelihood? Maybe 5% the relationship is toast over this sweater. Okay. Are you 5% worried about it? You feel 90% worried about it. If there's a 5% chance, why are you not 5% worried? Okay. Questions? Jenny says he ate that up. That feels good. Should I make a TikTok out of that? Sometimes on these lives, I riff and then I come up with TikToks. Yes, Jenny says. Yes, Bonnie says. All right. I gotta make a note. Matthias, record a TikTok with that one. That was a good one. Okay. Abandonment. What did I say? Abandon. All right, a little bit of background music here. Abandonment. What did I say? And then I said, I have to remember so I can record it later. Green dot. Okay, and then 5% worried versus 90% worried. Was that what hit? Was that what I should record? Any piece of that I'm forgetting? Yeah, if it's a 5% problem, why are you not 5% worried about it? That's what's up. I didn't come up with that. That's a I forget where I read it though. It was in some textbook. It's good, because it made me look in the mirror and I'm like, oh shit, I'm often 90% worried about things that have a 5% chance of ruining everything. Powerful. Let's do one more voicemail, yeah? I like this one.
Hi, Matthias. I have parents who are from Vietnam. And while I was born in Vietnam, I've lived in the US for 20 plus years now. And there's time where cultures and unspoken expectations get in the way of connection with my parents. It's something that I've really struggled with them is expectation, and my stepdad having this unspoken rule of thinking that children needs to give back financially, while in the past he didn't really give us a emotionally safe home. And I've been in therapy for quite some time, and then I've learned how to set boundary and just do all the proper therapy work and inner work. I would like to ask, how would one continue to navigate the cultural difference between Asia and the Western teaching without feeling guilty? Is it finding a balance of saying yes and no? Is it continue to put myself first? Like, I'm conflicted between having boundary versus having a wall, and I hope you clarify.
It's great. What a great question. All right, so here's something to know. Like, anyone here feel like them and their parents have just different expectations around the relationship? like you have one set of expectations, you have one thing of like what you think you owe mom and dad, or what mom and dad owe you, and then your parents for some reason have like a totally different map of that, or your kids seem to have a totally different understanding. Like they feel like they owe you nothing, and you're like, well, hold on, like what happened to all the sacrifices that I gave? Anyone along that spectrum? Yeah. So Jenny, yes. Nicole, yes. Anyone on Instagram, YouTube? How you feeling? Yeah. Let me get over there. Definitely says, yeah. Aloha. Hi. Elise. Of course. Yeah. 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 That's good. I should probably go on YouTube. Is YouTube kicking? Are we hanging out on YouTube also? There's 10 folks watching over on YouTube. Yeah. Hi. Let me get over there. Hi YouTube. Yes, white, green. Oh, yep. We're hanging out. All right. Sorry, I'm tuning in over YouTube as well. Okay. So here's the thing about the when we look at the kind of the cross-cultural stuff, it's often so helpful because then it kind of makes sense, I think, of less culturally diverse situations. So for example, like you have the Vietnamese, kind of worldview. I'll break that down in just a minute. That is really in conflict with the American worldview in the sense of like the Western individualized American worldview. Because there's lots of American worldviews, obviously, but they tend to kind of clump around certain kinds of values. And so it's like when you can look at like Eastern and Western are really good. When you can look at the contrast in Eastern and Western cultures, then you can see maybe kind of smaller variations of that within your parents, and you realize like, oh, it's not as dramatic as Eastern Western or like Vietnamese versus American, but there's like a 10% piece of that maybe is actually relevant to my Midwest parents and me, because I think that there's generational gaps along the same cultural lines. I'll explain that in a minute. So for example, in Vietnamese culture, it's a very high context culture. High context means that there's a lot of implications that you use to communicate. You communicate through implications, through assumptions, through like subliminal messaging. And I think that Americans typically really are kind of almost allergic to that because we prefer communication that is low context. Low context means you don't need a lot of context to understand what you're saying. You just say it directly. Just say what you mean is what we say in America. Like spit it out, say it directly. Stop. And then it's almost like if it's too high context, if there's too many hidden layers, it feels like you're being deceitful or you have an angle or you're being manipulative or you're being toxic even. It's just like cut out with the games. Just give it to me. Now, here's the thing. Americans actually have an internal contradiction on this front because we believe that to a point, but we don't like that when it comes to negative feedback. We don't like going up to someone and saying, you're a piece of work, I don't like you, and you're overweight. We don't say that. Like, we don't. The French do. The French will do it. The French are very high context when it comes to positive, but low context when it comes to negative feedback. The French will be like, oh, you've gained weight. I can't do a French accent, I'm sorry. Like, why? Are you eating too much? You should stop. You're going to have to buy new clothes soon. Your pants are too tight. It doesn't look flattering. The Dutch are kind of like that as well. So it's like you have like some of these European cultures that are so low context on the negative feedback that it's abrasive and kind of insulting for the Americans. So the Americans have this blend. We have a blend where we don't like giving direct negative feedback like that, where we use I feel statements, and we actually are very indirect in the way we give negative feedback. We talk about our feelings, well, maybe, and just like, I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm just saying that maybe here's like, we kind of dance around the negative. That's why all of our TikToks are about how to communicate negative feedback and boundaries. We have this dream that we could just set a boundary and a boundary would solve. Like we don't have to say things that can ruin and implode the relationship and people will just do what we want. How do I, it's like we're so avoidant of conflict. That's our cultural Achilles heel. We're so conflict avoidant. Now, not every American, obviously, I'm speaking in broad strokes here. All of us know, folks that are just, will say what they think, and the Enneagram 8s of the world, the Americans that are very fine to tell you like, you've gained weight. So, all right, fine. Especially, honestly, Americans that come from some of those cultures that hail from Dutch, French, Russian cultures that are more direct. Even Asian cultures can be direct in the negative. Asian cultures are high context. Vietnamese in particular, very, very indirect on negative criticism and high context. There's different Asian cultures that are different on the negative thing. So some Asian cultures will be more direct on negative feedback than others. Like, but generally, like, and not just Asian cultures, some Middle Eastern cultures, Indian cultures, like Indonesian cultures, like just that part of the world has like a much higher context thing, and then you get down to Australia and it's low context again. So anyway, the implications of that for the parent is like dad in this situation is likely. Oh, what's the chat happening? Is anyone following? Hold on, sorry. I saw someone write something in all caps. Hey, Enneagram mentioned. Sugarcoating. My video stopped? Oh, Jenny says, it implies you think the reader is too dumb to read in between the lines. No, this is true. In Eastern cultures, they call it reading the air. It's reading between the lines. It's like there's this idea that if you give implications, what you're doing is you're assuming that there's context that they can pick up on. We do this in America too in small ways. Like we have slang. We have when we're at dinner, it's like, here, let me get the bill. No, let me get the bill. No, let me cover. You got it last time. No, let me. And so we have these little like games that we do that are high context. Things that are polite, manners, all of that is high context. So it's like the more shared culture you have, typically, the higher context it is. The more shared values you have, the more higher context it is. So if you're, I live in Franklin, Tennessee, which is a very conservative town and predominantly Christian. So there's lots of lingo, shared meaning around just like conservative Christianity that people just speak freely. I got in an Uber, and the Uber driver started asking me what church he goes to and started using like Christian evangelical lingo. He didn't know that I was religious or anything. So I'm like, wow, okay, so this is so just within the water of the culture that, an Uber driver picking up a total stranger feels total comfort just jumping right into a conversation like that. So same thing, I think in Salt Lake City, like in Mormon culture, like you have LDS culture so woven into Salt Lake that I'm sure even the Uber drivers have certain lingo that they could click into, depending if you're there or not. So like, anyway, I'm spending too much time on that point. San Francisco, tech culture, whatever. Whenever there's a subculture, there's high context elements within it. Okay, so you have Vietnamese and American. There's likely value differences between those two things that your dad's operating from and that you're operating from. You said it. You said something along the lines of like, hey, my dad was not emotionally present for us, but my dad wants money. My dad's asking me for money. He feels like it's owed, but he wasn't like providing a very emotionally present childhood. So I don't feel like this relational warmth wanting to give him money. That is a totally different value difference when it comes to hierarchy and what is owed to someone. Specifically in America, the value of the relationship is connected to the emotional connection, the emotional warmth, the reciprocity that we feel in the relationship. If the quality of the relationship is up, then what I'm willing to do goes up, and my loyalty goes up, and even my financial, emotional time investment goes up. Not the case in Vietnamese culture. Vietnamese culture, that all of those things are assumptions based on hierarchy and eldership and the role someone has in your life. It's like, I'm your father. Hello, I've sacrificed for you. This is what fathers do for their daughters and daughters do for their fathers. It's the assumption is not earned. Trust isn't earned. Loyalty isn't earned. It's endowed. It's given. It's established based off of role. It is your role, regardless of how I parented you. It is your role to do blank, blank, blank. Right? So, really helpful to know. Who here has like a micro version of that in their relationship, either with their parents or their kids, where maybe you have a kid that thinks they owe you nothing and that you're basically like the same as like, where should I go to Chinese food? Like, should I eat at this place and this place? Which place has better food? Like it's like commercialized. It's like you're a product they're trying to decide between. It's like you feel like they've given you a 1-star review. Like it's like the entire childhood, all the sacrifices that you've made for them feel irrelevant, and you're being judged purely off of how they emotionally feel about you in the present. Anyone feel that way and feel frustrated by that? It would make sense if you did. And then on the other end, maybe you have a parent who thinks that you have all these obligations and they can come in and make decisions on behalf of you and based off your life and tell you what to do and what not to do, who to marry and where to work and what not to do, like how to spend your money, how not to spend, how to dress, how not to dress, because they're your mom. And they get to visit and come over unannounced because because that's what family does. And they get to visit the grandbaby right away, like after the birth. And they feel entitled to all these things, right? And Richard Campbell in the chat on Instagram says, well, that's just, love unconditional. These are cultural categories. I'm going to push back here. I'm not calling you out in a negative way. I'm just saying that we have different ideas of what conditional and unconditional love are. Conditions aren't bad. Conditions are the ties between us. And so is it better to have a relationship with no infrastructure or anything tying us together outside of our emotions? Well, I don't know. That's a cultural decision that we make. Richard says, call me out. All good. All right, bud. Hey, we're here. We're doing it. Yeah, I was calling your name wrong, I think, earlier. Is it Jeannie? Jeannie? I think it's Jeannie. Yeah. Jeannie says, okay, that's good. Yeah, it ended up being a good condition. Well, yeah, I think that with a lot of these things, it's how we grew up and it's how we receive love. Like, for example, it feels really good when you're sick and your friends bring you over soup. And you could think like, well, your best friends are the ones who eat, like the ones that you feel warmth with, the ones you feel connection with, give you soup. And then there's moments, I don't know if you've noticed this, there's moments where like someone will bring you soup that you didn't really even anticipate or you didn't expect. Like you have like a friend that, let's say, that's kind of almost on the fringes, not quite an acquaintance, but like a friend that you see every once in a while, and they like really come through for you in a time when you're suffering. Like maybe you have a child, or maybe you're in the hospital, or maybe like there's something hard going through in your life, and they're strangely there for you, and they give you soup and warmth, and they check in on you and made you a batch of cookies, and you're like, gosh, wow. Like that immediately like scoops up the relationship, right? And what I often find with parents is the ones that are the most demanding, let's say they're not narcissistic. Let's put that on the back burner for a second. The ones that are the most demanding also, I sense, a lot of the time, are willing to back up their demandingness with loyalty in certain areas. Like the parents who are very, very critical, for example, will also be the ones that are very dedicated, maybe perhaps to their church or to community service or to voting or to, like, they have some, like, loyalty is not just something that's isolated to their kids, like that they demand from their kid. It's also something they express in some area of their life, not necessarily to the kid themselves, because I meet kids, for example, where the parents are like uninvolved in childcare whatsoever. And they make all these demands, but they don't give anything else. But I mean, honestly, again, unless there's like a narcissistic quality to it, it's like they do feel some sense of indebtedness to a system. And that really is bound culturally also, because I think that culturally, in hierarchical cultures, there's lots of obligations you have to people higher than you in the hierarchy and across. And then oftentimes there's not as many obligations you have to people down in the hierarchy, but the obligations always kind of stream upward. Does that make sense? So it's like in Asian cultures, the decision-making power is always up-down. It's not obvious that the decision-making power ever goes from down up. It's not like grandkids are confronting grandparents on how they should live their life or talk or think. That would be disrespectful. But a grandparent can certainly tell the grandchild, you're not allowed to marry that person. They don't belong in the family. So it's like the power and decision-making power goes one way. But even the grandparents feel an indebtedness to their elders when they were younger, and to their peers and to the community as an elder of the larger community. And so they are gonna they're the kind of folks that you could wake up in the middle of the night and be like, hey, you have to blank. And they would feel a sense of indebtedness and loyalty of like, yeah, that's my role within this culture. I have to do that. So I guess I could give more concrete examples of that, but I'll move on just so I don't go all the way down that rabbit hole. Yes. Okay. So high, low context cultures. Fascinating. Hierarchy. That's another big one. Decision-making power, top down versus up and down. Trust, trust is something that is earned versus trust is something that's just given based off role. Time. Like there's so many different, I think, variations of cultural values that inform these kinds of, that inform these things. I just think that, like, Ultimately, what you're not trying to do is convince your parent to come over to your side of things or to write off your concerns and go to their way of doing things. It's likely something in the middle. What you can do, though, is take out the negative narrative that they're somehow controlling, narcissistic, toxic, yada, yada, yada. If you have some sort of like really disparaging label that you've put over your kid or your parent, your kid is just lazy and selfish and doesn't, respect, da, 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 da. I'm like, maybe. Or maybe they have what's called democratized kinship values. That's the academic term for it. They have values that are based around different things. They don't feel as much loyalty to role and obligation in a bottom-up hierarchical type way, but they do feel that desire for emotional warmth and loyalty, but through the quality of the relationship as determined by the emotional conversations you have together and the positive experiences you share together. Often parents are very big on like acts of service and following through on like the mundane normal needs of life. And the kid is like, I'm looking for positive emotional experiences, often with emotional disclosure, and positive experiences with you that are fun or meaningful or emotionally have higher valence to it. So it's not just my dad pointed out that there's weeds in the garden and then he gave me an idea for how I can use this certain fertilizer that won't be hospitable to this kind of weed. That's like an act of love from a more traditional value system, which is I love you through helping you and giving you suggestions and advice. That's one of the routes I love you in. Kids that rarely is experienced as love sometimes can be experienced as criticism. Man, my dad is always picking at my garden and telling me it's not good enough. Can you see that? Can you see the cultural difference? Even if we're talking about like white families in America, there's these cultural differences between kids and parents often. The kid wants dad to go, oh, what a beautiful garden. You've done such a good job. I could see how much hard work you've put into it. Man, that is really reflective of just who you are as a person. Oh, the kid's like, oh, thank you. I did work hard on this. It was on my Pinterest board for months. I don't need help. I need affirmation. Right? And the parent is like, why do I give affirmation? Like, I can help you. Why tell you it's fine the way it is when it could be better? And it's like different cultural languages, different cultural values. Is this interesting? I find this stuff fascinating. I'm all about this. I've been like obsessed with this cultural synthesis, this anthropology of parents and kids the past few months that I just can't get enough of because it's so helpful. Yeah. Democratizing kinship of value. Yeah. So it's aloha. It's democratized kinship is a term. You can Google it. Democratized kinship by someone called Reczek, Reczek. And she has a whole paper that's really fascinating on the shift from traditional values or legacy values into democratized kinship. I'm building a deep dive on it in the estrangement.com membership right now. Anyway, all right, I gotta run. It's 10 o'clock. This was fun, though. This was fun. Protectiveness. Ooh, that's a good theme. You're right. I think that's a big one, too. The sense of control is also probably related to the sense of protectiveness. Jason says, I want a cheerleader on TikTok. Hey, yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm not even joking. That is what people want. All right, gotta run. What a joy to be with you, even just for a little bit. We'll talk again soon, okay? Bye for now. See ya. Bum, ba-dum, bum.